The morning sun was just starting to burn through the haze when everything went wrong. A man stood in our front yard with a cheap pistol pointed directly at my wife's face. His hands trembled like he was gripping more than he could handle. And his wide, bulging eyes carried the sort of fragile confidence you only see in people who've never been tested. And all of this chaos, because she had jogged past the HOA clubhouse without carrying identification. The sight would have been laughable if it wasn't so dangerous. What he didn't know, and what I secretly wished I could have witnessed registering on his face, was that the woman he had just threatened wasn't an ordinary jogger. She was Claire, my wife, an active Delta Force operative. Only 48 hours earlier, she had returned from a classified mission overseas. She still hadn't unpacked her field kit or stored away the gear that had followed her across continents. Now here she was, being confronted by a wannabe tough guy, holding a pistol sideways like some B-movie villain. I knew Claire could have ended the situation with a pine cone and a shoelace if she wanted to. But surprisingly, she held herself back. For once she actually gave the man a chance to surrender. That restraint didn't last long. We had chosen this neighborhood for peace, not conflict. Claire wanted quiet mornings in the garden, maybe a few chickens in the backyard. A life far from the adrenaline that had ruled her career. I wanted reliable internet and a finished basement where I could bury myself in cybersecurity projects. Instead, we walked straight into a neighborhood association that ran its streets like a poorly funded paramilitary unit. They didn't even call themselves an HOA in meetings. They had branded their little empire as the Home Safety Division, the HSD. 4 matte black golf carts sat outside their clubhouse, each one stenciled with block letters like they were patrol cruisers. Some even had dollar store blue lights strapped to the roofs. The whole thing looked like SWAT units if SWAT had cup holders and plastic lawn gnome decals bolted to the bumpers. At first, I thought it was a prank. Surely no one took themselves that seriously. But then we met Karen Brewster, the president. From day one she introduced herself with laminated badges hanging from lanyards and carried 3 clipboards like trophies. Her fixed smile carried the smug weight of someone who had never been told no in her life. She handed us a thick booklet of rules, absurd regulations like, grass height must not exceed 2.75 inches, jogging attire must remain non-intimidating, residents must maintain approachable body language during recreational activity. When I asked her what intimidating body language even meant, she smiled wider and said, "You'll know it when you see it." That was when I realized we were in trouble. Claire simply thanked her politely, hiding the same iron composure she used during field briefings overseas. She had dealt with warlords and corrupt officials. One overzealous HOA president wasn't going to rattle her. But on the 8th day of our residency, peace shattered. Claire went for her usual morning jog while I brewed coffee and logged into work. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from our security cameras. At first, I thought it was a delivery truck. But when I pulled up the feed, 2 HSD golf carts had blocked the road. Claire stood perfectly still with her hands half raised, while a pudgy man in a tactical vest pointed a pistol squarely at her chest. And that was when I realized this wasn't about enforcing lawn rules. We weren't dealing with neighbors. We were dealing with armed imposters who thought they were above the law. The man's voice cracked as he barked fake orders like a cop in a bad TV drama. "Hands higher. You're trespassing in a restricted jogging zone." He sounded more desperate than authoritative. His pistol wavered from the strain of holding it steady. Claire, in contrast, didn't flinch. Her calm expression reminded me of how she looked when someone droned on too long during mission briefings. She tilted her head, studied him, and finally spoke. "Sir, under Florida Statute 790 Han, brandishing a firearm in a threatening manner is a felony. You should think carefully about your next move." The man blinked, thrown off balance. Nobody had ever spoken back to him with that level of authority. "Don't you quote laws to me," he snapped. "This is HOA jurisdiction." Claire laughed softly. "The HOA doesn't outrank the Constitution. You've pointed an unregistered weapon at a civilian on private property. That's attempted assault with a deadly weapon." 2 other men flanked him, each wearing mismatched tactical vests and gripping batons like they had been purchased at a yard sale. Their confidence wavered as they shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or step back. That's when I stepped outside, coffee mug in hand. I walked onto the porch and called out, "Gentlemen, this is your last chance to walk away before things go sideways." The so-called leader spun toward me, veins bulging. "Stay out of this. This is an official enforcement action under the Home Safety Division." Claire smirked. "Official," she echoed. Then she moved. What happened next was faster than my eyes could track. 1 second she stood calmly. The next she had stepped aside, grabbed his wrist, twisted and ripped the pistol free. The gun clattered across the pavement. In the same motion she shoved him backward into one of his buddies, sending both tumbling into the grass. The last remaining officer charged with a baton raised high. Claire ducked, swept his legs and pinned him face down in the dirt with her knee pressing lightly against his back. She didn't even look winded.
The so-called leader groaned, clutching his twisted wrist. "You broke it," he whined. Claire crouched down close enough for him to see the sharp edge in her eyes. "No," she whispered. "If I broke it, you wouldn't be holding it right now. That was just a warning." By then, neighbors had gathered on porches and sidewalks, phones raised, recording everything. Some gasped, others whispered. One woman muttered, "Is that Karen's crew?" And right on cue, Karen herself stormed across the street, visor pulled low, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Arrest her," she shrieked. "She assaulted my officers. You all saw it." Claire rose to her feet, brushing dust from her palms. She looked Karen dead in the eye. "Your officers?" Claire asked flatly. "Lady, they're about to be defendants." And just like that, the real police arrived. Sirens wailed as two sheriff's cruisers pulled up, lights washing the scene in red and blue. Deputies stepped out, scanning the mess of grown men in discount tactical gear sprawled across my lawn. "Drop the weapons," one deputy shouted. "They already did," I said, pointing at the pistol lying 10 feet away. Claire released the man pinned beneath her knee and calmly stepped aside, hands visible, posture relaxed. Karen bolted forward, clipboard flapping. "Officers, arrest that woman immediately. She attacked my hired security." The deputy nearest to her raised an eyebrow. "Hired security? Ma'am, these men are impersonating law enforcement. That's a felony." One of the wannabes panicked immediately. "It wasn't my idea. Karen paid us. She said it was legal." The street fell silent. Even Karen froze. The flashing lights painted the street in sharp red and blue strokes, reflecting off the stunned faces of neighbors peering from behind curtains and phone cameras. The three men in mismatched tactical gear groaned as deputies pinned their arms behind their backs, metal cuffs clinking into place. Each charge rolled off the deputy's tongue like a verdict. Brandishing a firearm, impersonating an officer, attempted assault, trespassing, conspiracy. With every word I could see the color drain from the so-called leader's face. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced with the hollow look of a man who realized his fantasy had just turned into a criminal record. One of the deputies lifted the cheap knockoff Glock with a gloved hand and shook his head. "Unregistered. Figures," he muttered before securing it in an evidence bag. Karen, however, wasn't about to accept reality. The moment she saw her hired muscle being loaded into cruisers, she bolted toward the nearest deputy, clipboard flapping like it carried some kind of authority. "Officers, you don't understand," she shrieked. "I am the HOA president, and those are my men. They were conducting an official neighborhood enforcement action. This woman attacked them. She's dangerous. She has combat training. Arrest her immediately." Her words cracked through the air like the screech of a crow. Neighbors flinched at her tone, but the deputies weren't impressed. The deputy she tried to lecture simply turned, eyebrows raised. "Official enforcement action? Lady, do you even hear yourself? These men are not officers. They're impersonating law enforcement. That's a felony under federal law." Karen's face turned blotchy red. "That's absurd. I authorized them. As president, I have the right to hire security for this community. We were just keeping the streets safe." By pointing a loaded gun at an unwoman jogging down the street, the deputy countered. His voice was calm, steady, carrying the authority Karen only dreamed she had. "You've crossed the line into criminal territory." One of the hired men broke under the pressure. "It wasn't my idea," he blurted, voice trembling. "Karen paid us. She said it was legal. She said the HOA had special jurisdiction." The crowd gasped. Even Karen froze. That single confession sealed her fate. The second deputy grabbed Karen's arm just as she tried to retreat. "Not so fast, ma'am. You'll be coming with us. Charges include solicitation to commit assault, conspiracy, and aiding impersonation of an officer. You're lucky nobody got shot." Karen jerked against his grip, sputtering. "This is harassment. Do you know who I am? I run this neighborhood. You can't arrest me in front of my residents." The deputy didn't flinch. "You're being arrested because you put your residents in danger. Titles don't put you above the law." The crowd broke into scattered applause. Some neighbors even cheered openly, while others whispered to each other in disbelief. A few lifted their phones higher, making sure every second was captured. I crossed my arms, the corner of my mouth curling into a grin. "You should have stuck to writing passive-aggressive letters, Karen." Claire calmly released the last groaning wannabe from under her knee, then dusted off her hands. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence alone carried more weight than Karen's endless screaming ever could. The deputies shoved Karen into the back of the squad car, her visor slipping sideways, clipboard still clutched in her fist like a meaningless shield. The door slammed shut with finality. For the first time since moving in, I felt like the street belonged to the residents again, not the self-appointed tyrants. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, local news vans swarmed the neighborhood, reporters tripping over cables to get footage of the HOA clubhouse. "Armed HOA sting goes wrong," the headlines read. Videos from neighbors spread online, racking up thousands of views. Clips of Claire disarming the gunman and pinning his partner became viral under captions like "Delta Force wife versus HOA SWAT team." By the end of the week, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Without Karen to hold her iron grip, The remaining members panicked. Facing lawsuits, fines, and public embarrassment, they voted to remove her permanently. Karen herself sat in county jail, denied bail while prosecutors built a case. Her lawyer tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, but when multiple neighbors testified, and when the recordings showed her orchestrating the raid, it was clear she was finished. The 3 hired men didn't fare much better. Each faced a laundry list of charges, and none of them had the money or reputation to fight their way out. Their names became neighborhood punchlines. Meanwhile, something shifted among the residents. People who had once whispered about HOA rules now spoke openly. Neighbors began stopping by our porch, some with casseroles, others with nothing but gratitude. They shook Claire's hand like she had liberated them from an occupying force. One elderly man even said, "Ma'am, I did 2 tours in Vietnam, and I've never seen anyone handle a situation that cleanly. You saved lives today." Claire only nodded politely, brushing it off as if she hadn't just dismantled an entire militia cosplay in under 30 seconds. But I saw it, the way her shoulders relaxed for the first time since we moved in. For once she felt the peace she had been chasing. The best moment came a week later. Sitting on our porch, I leaned back with a glass of iced tea while Claire tended to her plants. The air was calm, the kind of suburban quiet we had originally hoped for. "So," I asked, "think they'll ever try something like this again?" Claire smirked without looking up. "If they're stupid enough, I'll be ready." I chuckled, but deep down I knew she meant it. She had fought in deserts, jungles, and war zones. A suburban HOA wasn't going to be the fight that broke her. From that day forward, the entire neighborhood understood one brutal truth. The HOA had finally picked the wrong family, and they would never ever forget it.